Hello, and welcome to the first ever episode of Strong Collectors Comics. My name is Jordan.
And I'm Dakota, his plucky sidekick.
That's good. Plucky. Well, that's good, Dakota, because I'm feeling excited. Today we are going to, moving forward, we're going to be talking about all things comics, but today we are digging into our top 5 favorite Marvel comic storylines. Now, these aren't necessarily the greatest of all time. I think there's a certain metric, right? If this were the Oscars, we're not necessarily giving out the Oscars. These are like the People's Choice Awards, so we are bestowing upon them. There might be some nostalgia weaved in there. I don't know about you, Dakota. That's kind of my list. So we're going to have some of that, but I think I feel pretty solid about my list. So
yeah, I think
top 5, start at the bottom and go up to number 1.
I think so.
Okay.
I think I would assume people are probably going to agree more with your list than they are mine. I think just kind of like our varying style. You've got an English degree. You're a little more, sophisticated when it comes to books. I'm much more of a look at the pictures kind of guy, and that's kind of my main criteria. But it's got to be a good story too. Like, it's not all pictures. That's how I started out as a kid, was all pictures, skip the text boxes. Not necessary, but
when I was a kid, I thought you just read the comic and then threw it away. So I learned that soon. I don't do that anymore. So,
I remember that. Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was like a newspaper. I blame my brothers and poor parenting for that. But
yes.
All right. Dakota, would you like to give me number 5?
All right, my number 5, and I will admit there may be some recency bias in some of my selections here, but that does not mean that these are not great stories. Number 5 for me is Daredevil, and this is the Chip Zdarsky run. Pretty long run from 2019 to 2023. So this is starting with kind of like the beginnings of when he gets sent to prison into King Daredevil, even while Daredevil Elektra is happening. I like that whole story. The art was cool. I'd never really read much Daredevil until this one. And this one made me a Daredevil fan, made me want to backtrack and get some old action figures, made me read some more Elektra.
Yeah.
This was a good one. This really got me back into the street level heroes.
Yeah. Chip Zdarsky, he's good. He has some good Spider-Man stuff that didn't quite crack my top 5, but he does a lot of good work. So I like that pick. I am going to go with number 5 for me will be Superior Spider-Man. Now, the reason I picked this one, Dakota, it really is the one that kind of got me back a couple years, I guess in high school, back in, I don't know, 20
couple years ago.
Started a couple years ago. But I wasn't really like, this was one that got me back into picking them up like every month, as in getting the tie-ins and everything. I really liked it because I know there was some controversy, just the premise, Doc Ock stealing Peter Parker's body, becoming Spider-Man. I thought it was a cool way to kind of shake up the Spidey formula. I think they did some really cool things with the character of Doc Ock becoming Spidey. I wanted it to go longer, personally. They only went about 30 issues, mainly because I think people were mad about the switch, so they kind of wrapped it up real quick. But that one stands out to me. I know there's some issues with it, but I've always enjoyed it, and that's one that I've gone back and reread.
Yeah, I remember. I figured that would be on your top 5, because I remember you letting me borrow those, and I knew that those were prized possessions, so I made sure to take care when you let me borrow them.
I appreciate it. You didn't throw them away after you read them.
That's true. This next one is probably my most controversial. I think most people would disagree that it should be on a top 5 list, but this is my top 5 list, so y'all chill out. And that's the all-new X-Men / Uncanny X-Men. So this is post Avengers vs. X-Men. Shirt for that.
There you go.
I liked Avengers vs. X-Men, but I kind of liked the fallout of that because I think Cyclops was cooler as a villain. And even though I liked his team, I kind of liked the fact that they brought back the original 5 X-Men from the past to try to, make Cyclops see the error of his ways, whatever.
Right.
And then I think kind of just following them around was kind of fun because it kind of makes you feel like we're too old to have read the original X-Men stuff. I mean, we could go back and read it, but sorry, folks, I don't.
You mean too young?
Wait, yeah, too young.
Too old?
Well, the comics are too old for us to have been around. Whatever. Yeah. We're too young for it.
We missed the early releases in 1963, unfortunately.
Right. And for me, it's pretty hard to go back and read those like as a series.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of made me feel like I got to read those original X-Men as they were younger, growing up and trying to learn kind of their way in the world. And there was some cool tie-ins with like Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers, stuff like that. So
I think at least some of that was your favorite Brian Michael Bendis, if I remember right.
I have some issues with him and his like long-windedness in like Mighty Avengers, but in this one, everything made sense. Like there wasn't like pointless speech bubbles that I feel like he sometimes does.
He tends to be very, very talky.
Right.
It's like every little thing you say gets put in there.
Yeah, it worked in this one.
That's fair. Okay. All right. I like it. You know, I have certain feelings about Cyclops as a villain, but I'll give it to you. Okay. Mine, number 4, is going to be Planet Hulk. I really like this one. This was one of the first Hulk stories I read that I felt super invested in, just because in many ways I've always felt there's only so many things you can do with Hulk. I think you need to be a special kind of writer to do Hulk well. And this one was cool, taking him off Earth, getting him to the Gladiator planet, crash lands there, of course, exiled from Earth. And they had a more like, not like Smart Hulk where he's like a genius, but he can talk and think and stuff, which I think let them do a little bit of a more in-depth story. I think they introduced some cool characters, kind of just taking Hulk in a whole new direction.
Yeah.
And, of course, the fallout of that was World War Hulk, which was a really fun summer event. I liked it, but I don't think it was quite to the level of storytelling with Planet Hulk. But for me, that was one of the Hulk stories. Like, you don't have to be a Hulk fan, I don't think, to read Planet Hulk and get into the story and appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that is for sure my favorite Hulk story. And I would assume a lot of other people would say that. The only one that I think I could see some people arguing now is Immortal Hulk. I've seen a lot of people really liking that story. But I don't think anything is ever going to top, like you said, that Planet Hulk into World War Hulk kind of saga. That was peak Hulk. I'll hit you with one of my runner-ups just to piggyback off of your Hulk. I had Red Hulk almost made my list. So that Hulk line where he first joins in, that was 2008 to 2011. Jeff Loeb, I like a lot of his writing. Ed McGuinness, I think, is some of my favorite Hulk art.
I'd agree with that. I think he kind of has the quintessential Hulk look in my mind's eye. I know there's a lot of strong feelings about how the Hulk is portrayed, at least in the modern era. I think he nails Hulk. I agree.
Yeah, I agree. And I liked that. Well, also that's pretty heavily biased towards like that's kind of like with your Superior Spider-Man. This Hulk story was what kind of started me into like picking up weekly. I wasn't able to get to comic store. We didn't have one in town, so it was like maybe every month I'd go in and pick up whatever I missed out on. But yeah, I thought that was pretty fun, and like trying to figure out who Red Hulk was. That was a fun story. So now getting to my number 3, actually back into the top 5. I'm going to say my number 3 is The Ultimates. So that's kind of your original kind of re-storytelling of the Avengers. Like I said, I don't really get into the like original OG stories, but then, and you're able to, read it all the way through. It's not like I have to go back and read 1,000 issues of Avengers. I think this was maybe 12 issues, something like that. And I remember they had the animated show that came out too, or the animated movie, Ultimates 1 and 2. And I thought those were pretty cool. So I thought the comics did well.
Yeah, I mean, Ultimates definitely paved the way for the MCU as we know it. I also remember that was kind of cool to read that one and then see like in real time as they were adapting a lot of those elements. And I really don't think we would have had the MCU as it is without the Ultimates. So I'll die on that hill. But yeah, I think later on in the series they kind of lost it, but that first one, very good. I mean, when we got to Ultimates 3 and you got...
Once Blob starts eating the Wasp and...
Yeah, that one, that can be a whole nother episode of
pretty sure Thor gets his sister pregnant.
Yeah, there's a lot of some weird stuff started happening in the Ultimates. But yeah, that first one is pretty great. Okay, my number 3, Dakota, I'm going to go with an X-Men story. And this was kind of hard for me because there are a lot of great X-Men stories. I'm going to go with the classic Days of Future Past saga. And I go with that one because, I mean, I think even reading this one when I was younger, like it was very different for like watching the X-Men cartoon and then kind of getting into comics. You had really the grittiness, you got Wolverine getting vaporized. And I remember that just kind of blowing my mind as a kid. I mean, like, I didn't know you could do that to Wolverine. So, I think it does a really, I mean, there's some other storylines within there, but I think it does really well. And especially very early on in comics, like the dystopian future, like putting the heroes in that setting, where you had like a lot of the prominent heroes had died off. Like, this is kind of heavy duty. So, but then also coupling that with the time travel thing and like having the fun current day X-Men, really like Chris Claremont at the top of his game. I think just that's a great era for X-Men. You also got in that era like Dark Phoenix Saga. If you haven't checked those out, those are definitely, especially if you're exposed to them. I like the Dark Phoenix or Days of Future Past movie, but the comic really nails it. So. Okay. That would be one of my top X-Men stories.
Maybe this is going to hurt my street cred here on episode number 1, but I haven't read either of those stories. They're a little. It's too old.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth checking out, though. I know you have your feelings about.
I know. I should read it. I know in my heart that I should read it. I just have such a long list of other things I want to read that it's
I'm not asking you to dig up the, Stan Lee with Blob in a diaper or,
right,
anything, but it's a good one.
All right. Understandable. I get it. All right. My number 2, and we're going to have to play a little fast and loose with this. I'm going to say Norman Osborn running Heroes. But that's going to be kind of like your Dark Reign into Siege. But we can even go back a little bit into like Thunderbolts, like pre-Secret Invasion type stuff.
Right.
I like that concept. I think it was kind of cool because as reading it, you're like, obviously Norman Osborn is a bad guy, but he's getting to run all these programs and they're giving him way too much power. This is obviously going to end up like blowing up in everyone's faces. And I think the way they did that, because they played that out for quite a while.
Yeah, that was a slow build-up out of, like, Civil War into Thunderbolts and I remember, like, even reading those as they were coming out, there was this sense of, like, heaviness as you read them. Because really, like, I remember they had those promos where it was like, they won, he lost, except change, Dark Reign has begun. And there are all these promos of, like, the heroes being basically defeated by, like, Norman Osborn. And it was very, like, you felt like, as much as you can in a comic book, the bad guys won, at least for a time, right? And I think that they stuck with that for several years, which is impressive to me, because usually when they shake stuff up, like I said, in Superior Spider-Man, it's like we're going to do it for a couple months, and then we're going to, pull the rug out and go back to the way things were. So, yeah, that's a solid pick. I thought about those Thunderbolt comics, because if you haven't read those are good.
You kind of have to read those tie-ins because, like, I wanted to say Dark Avengers, but Dark Avengers just isn't as good if you don't have those other pieces building into it and then, like, playing off of it. So that's why I said you got to play a little fast and loose with that one of, like, story.
Yeah.
Technically, I picked, like, 3 or 4 right there, but it's my list. I make the rules here.
Right.
What about your number 2, Jordan?
That's a good pick. My number 2, this one's a little different, but it's called Daredevil Battling Jack Murdock. I don't know if I've talked to you about this one before, Dakota.
I don't think so.
But I read this one. It's basically a 4-issue series, but it is, as the title implies, through the lens of Daredevil's father, battling Jack Murdock. So you get, like, the Daredevil origin story, like, weaved in there, but it's really more about him, who's usually kind of a minor character. You hear it's kind of like the Wayne parents. They're kind of in it, and then they die, and then the hero starts and whatever. So it was just a really cool way to kind of set up the world, I think, that Daredevil comes into, and kind of like the stakes of the street level, and kind of gives you a sort of deeper understanding, I think, of the Daredevil character. But yeah, I thought it's a unique take. I think definitely worth checking out if you like Daredevil, especially. But even if you don't, I think it has a lot of good story and character development in there. And the ending, the last page, is one of my favorite panels in a comic book. So
I like that.
Won't tell you what it is, but it's it's real good. It's cool.
Okay, nice. All right, I think before we get into our number ones, I don't know about you, but I have a few runner-ups on top of the Red Hulk that I've already mentioned that I'd like to bring up, because if you've watched any of our shows on the Strong Collector podcast where we talk about action figures, making lists for that, I can never stick to whatever parameters we've set. So in addition to our top 5, ones that just barely didn't make the list, recency biased here for sure. I said Champions, the 2016 to 2019. I'm kind of liking those younger heroes kind of going against what the older guard is doing, trying to pave their own path. And I like all the characters in that crew, so that was pretty cool. Ironheart, or technically Invincible Iron Man, 1 through 600, but it's 19 issues. They just jumped ahead.
Were they one of those legacy renumbering?
Yeah, exactly.
Confusing.
Right. So I liked that one, I think, a little bit more than the actual Ironheart storyline, where she has her own series. But both of those are really good. And then I also had my last one was Avengers 1998 to about 2000, the Heroes Return era. George Perez was doing the art there. So kind of like how I like Ed McGuinness for the Hulks. I think George Perez is like, I mean, I don't think anybody would argue that he's one of the best comic book artists. And that line for Avengers was really cool. And that was one of the first ones that I had read kind of like a lot of issues. One of like my older friends that was into comic books, like older friends, like he was like 50 something. And he was just kind of like, hey, start reading comic books. And like, he gave me like a whole box of Avengers. And I read through almost that whole box, and it was super cool. Do you have any runner-ups, Jordan?
Yeah. I mean, it'll be hard to narrow them down even, but I've got at least 2 in mind here. So one that I loved is Captain America: War and Remembrance, which is Roger Stern. But this is the one where there's a couple storylines within there, but the main one is Captain America is presented with the concept of running for president. So it's kind of about him processing through whether that's something he could or should do. There's some other fun stories. You get some kind of flashback origin things. You get a Baron Blood story, which is always fun. But that one kind of made me really like Captain America when I was younger. So that one's great. Oh, gosh. Death of Captain Marvel, also a great one. Probably one of the few comic book stories where death actually matters. So that one's really good. And then I'll go with the J. Michael Straczynski Spider-Man stuff. I think he has probably one of the most solid runs on Spider-Man of all time, where it really kind of took Spidey down to the basics in many ways, but he kind of also was like teaching, and he had the Moreland stuff and really put him through the ringer. But I think it shows to me what's really great about Spider-Man in a storyline.
Very cool.
So those are worth checking out.
All right, into the number ones.
Okay, number 1.
All right, this was one that I had read as like in my younger years, and then just recently reread, and it's one that I could not stop. Like I would get to the end of one issue, and it seemed like every issue ended on something that made you have to start the next issue. Like I don't think I ever ended any of these on the last page. I would end halfway through the next one. And this is Astonishing X-Men, the Josh Whedon and John Cassidy, 2004, 2008. It's like 24 issues. It's that's the best X-Men story ever. I've not read anything better. It's my number 1.
Right.
It's amazing. I love it.
Right.
I love the characters, the art.
Yeah.
Even it like makes me laugh out loud. Some of the like back and forths they have. You get Danger, like the Danger Room personified, and just totally destroys the X-Men.
Yeah.
It's cool.
There's some really cool stuff in that run. What I liked about that was it really embraces and kind of brought the X-Men, I think, back to being superheroes. You know, like the comic bookiness, because you kind of had the early X-Men movies and the influence on like they're all wearing leather and black, and it's kind of like grounded and stuff. Whereas this one, I remember there's even a line where I think Cyclops is like, "We're gonna go remind everyone that we're superheroes," So it's like, I think for a while X-Men had gotten into like just dealing with mutant X-Men stuff, and this one kind of brought it back into like actually dealing with things on a bigger scale and embracing what I think makes the X-Men really fun. And then kind of even bringing back their colorful, fun-looking costumes. So there's some really cool character moments in there too. So it's a solid pick. I was thinking about that one too, actually.
Nice.
Okay, and my number one. This one actually I think will be for sure controversial, Dakota.
Oh, nice.
You may have heard of this one, but it's called Spider-Man Reign. And it is basically The Dark Knight Returns, but Spider-Man. So it's like a 60-year-old Peter Parker, retired. I'm not going to get too much into the details because I want you and everyone else listening to read it. But of course, you know what I know. Things are going to happen. He's going to get pulled out of the shadows. And really, I think it's a good examination of, similar to how I felt about the Straczynski stuff, like what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. And again, there's some really cool... I mean, I like that you see no matter what situation he's in, there are certain things about Spider-Man that shine through. So, again, one of my favorite, definitely favorite Spider-Man interactions, but maybe one of my favorite all-time comic book interactions takes place in this book. So I won't get into that either. But if we ever do a deep dive into Spider-Man Reign, maybe we'll talk about it.
Okay, I like it. I'm going to have to put that one on my reading list.
Yeah, I think should be on Unlimited. So
I'm sure.
And catch them. Most of these probably are. But yeah, so that is our list of our top fives with some runner-ups. Let us know, what do you think? Are there any 5 that you agree with out of that? 5 that you would have? We'd love to hear about it. As I said, stay tuned, subscribe. We'll be talking about all things comics moving forward here. So thank you for listening. And until next time, stay strong.